Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is a US politics, update, smorgasbord of different elements of what is going on. There is so much going on in the US at the moment, partly or largely due to what Steve Bannon calls muzzle velocity, where the administration is doing so much so quickly that you can't fixate on one thing. You can't really report on one thing in any depth, because before you've got that article out, before you've produced a video to report on that incident, another thing has happened, and another executive order, and another this, and another that. And that has been incredibly successful for the Trump administration, where they have managed to absolutely flood the political landscape with an inundation of political proclamations and activity and executive orders, etc., etc. I think this quote from George Orwell's 1984 really sums up the situation particularly well. As someone says, in case you're wondering, you are here. So every record has been destroyed or falsified, every book rewritten, every picture has been repainted, every statue and street building has been renamed, every date has been altered, and the process is continuing day by day and minute by minute. History has stopped. Nothing exists except an endless present in which the party is always right. And I think that really sums up the situation for many reasons. We can start off with the fact that the US has taken off lots of what they would see as DEI stuff from the internet. Lots of articles and reports on, say, black or people of colour, women in the armed forces, stuff on the DoD website. It's been stripped out, celebrating their accomplishments. There has been, here's just one example of such. We have, as Charlie Sykes says, Arlington National Cemetery has begun wiping from its website histories highlighting black, Hispanic and women veterans. The change is in line with President Trump's directive to remove references to and support for diversity, equity and inclusion. So now, instead of diversity, equity, inclusion, you get exclusion. So you only get celebrated, I guess, if you're white. Anything that involves a person of color or a woman or white man is just taken off the websites, and then you're not allowed to. In fact, someone's just quoted George Orwell below that quote I've just given you, because it pertains to exactly this kind of stuff. People are really, really not happy about this.
Hey, just wanting everyone to know that the White House is removing all women from the list of graves at the Arlington Cemetery.
People are unhappy, but it's not just that. All sorts of other stuff has been taken off websites. Lots of scientific data and research, climate science, a whole suite of what they see as woke, controversial issue stuff, when it's just like celebrating something a black person has achieved in the context of the Department of Defense, or climate science, or data to do with scientific research into sexual diversity in this particular context. It's like, all sexual diversity, we're just going to expunge our everywhere from knowledge about this. Well, no, there still needs to be, like, whatever your moral views on sexual diversity are, you still need to do research into these phenomena in order to understand and be able to have any policy that is in that domain. It's just absolutely ridiculous. And then we had Ohio House just passed SB1, forbids colleges and from teaching historic events like slavery or Holocaust. They definitely did happen. It mandates that students, quote, reach their own conclusions about all controversial events. Quote from a college student attending a protest about this bill. They said that they say Nazis should be taught from both sides, which is insane and very fascist. The bill also prohibits universities from taking positions on controversial belief or policy. And of course, those controversial beliefs or policies are defined as climate policies, politics, foreign policy, DEI programs, immigration policy, marriage, abortion, or any belief or policy that is subject to political controversy. Students marching the 3 miles from Ohio State University to the state capitol in protest said, "This would make us think long and hard before committing to stay in Ohio. So there are some complaining that there's potentially a brain drain happening already in Ohio as a result of stuff like this. Now, this is insane. Absolutely insane. Now you can't teach slavery or the Holocaust as a fact. These things definitely happened in colleges in Ohio. It's just insane. Students have to reach their own conclusions about all these controversial events. That is what's happening. You're seeing a rewriting of history at the moment, and it is really, really dangerous. This is 1984 come to life in the US. And then you have Donald Trump as the president saying that CNN and MSNBC, he's claimed that they are illegal and corrupt. He's now saying, I think they're going to be turned off. So you're starting to see this increased, or you're continuing to see an increased pressure on critical media outlets. The free speech, freedom of speech is being attacked very, very openly in the US at the moment. For example, Republicans have threatened the billboard vendor with legal action to get them to pull the Medicaid billboards. So these billboards saying that they're going to cut Medicaid, etc., etc. They've had these billboards sort of pulled down and whatnot. Again, this attack on free speech. They really don't want Americans to know they're getting ready to gut Medicaid. Then talking about if we go back to the George Orwell quote here, it's what do we have? And we're living in this endless present where every statue and street building has been renamed. Well, here we have a statue that's been reworked. So you've got the Mount Rushmore thing. This is golden Mount Rushmore with Trump's head unveiled on it at Mar-a-Lago. And Mar-a-Lago is just becoming this gaudy shrine to excess and to Trump. It's pretty incredible. Something that I think is represented by that. But also interesting that Caitlin Collins has talked about it here.
So you already know that President Trump is working to dramatically reshape the federal government, but he's also looking to transform another historic aspect of the presidency, and that is the Oval Office. Since President Trump moved in nearly 8 weeks ago, he has more than tripled the number of paintings that you see hanging on the walls of the Oval Office. A lot of them are former presidents who once occupied that space. And I'm told Trump had his eye on some of them. He knew which ones he'd like to see hanging in the walls of the Oval, as every president has the chance to redecorate when they move in. But several others, he actually flipped through a catalog and looked through a national collection to see which ones he'd like to see hanging on the walls. There's so many that there's almost not really any wall space left when you're inside the Oval. But the president hasn't stopped there. Also in keeping with a style that he has adhered to for decades, there's a lot more gold inside the Oval Office. If you look above the mantle, there are several golden figurines lined across it. And often when the president is greeting a world leader sitting in those two chairs before the fireplace, you can see the golden medallions that are now in front of it. And if you look over to the tables, the side tables, you can see golden figurines of eagles placed there. If you look closely above the doors, the president actually had these golden cherubs shipped in from his Mar-a-Lago club in South Florida and has placed those there as well. Now, I've been inside the Oval several times. It definitely still has that historic look to it that you've known for decades, but it certainly has much more of the Trump stamp on it these days. I'm also told he's not stopping there. When you look outside the windows of the Oval Office to the Rose Garden, work is expected to start any day there now on Trump's effort to try to reshape it by essentially paving over the Rose Garden, that grassy area that you see where presidents hold ceremonies or press conferences. And he wants to make it more of a patio style and put.
So basically, he's just, whacking gold everywhere in this kind of ostentatious theme that you would expect from kind of, I don't know, cliche dictators, films about dictators and whatnot. It is so incredible. And then this came out, and then I just get this sense when you're, looking to gut Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, attack the poor to give tax cuts to the rich, and that's why they are wanting to raise the debt ceiling and do all that gutting is so that they can do that. At the same time, you've got this happening at Mar-a-Lago, and I just saw this as completely Hunger Games. If you've ever seen the Hunger Games films, tell me that this is not like that. I'm going to turn it off in case, music copyright and whatnot. But just there's this opulence that you see here this at the time at Mar-a-Lago, where you've got wags and riches. There you go, wives and girlfriends and riches. It's just all about money and not even glamour. It's not glamorous. It is tack. There's so much tack involved in all this kind of gold that you see everywhere. But this is Mar-a-Lago, and they're really reminiscent of those Hunger Games images of the elites in the capital, where the people in these districts are very poor and they're having to fight it out to give enjoyment and entertainment to the rich. It's just, so much that. Just a random thing here. Kash Patel, who's now FBI director, is still running a GoFundMe while he's in office, but it gives you a sense of who they've got in charge of the FBI. Friend, the deep state is in full panic mode, said Kash Patel on his Kash Patel Foundation on his fundraiser. They spent the last 4 years under Biden stacking the government with DEI radicals, weaponizing our institutions and pushing their woke agenda on every American. And that gives you an understanding of what you've just seen, right? Biden's DOJ, Department of Justice, targeted conservatives, censored free speech, and let the real criminals walk free. He said, with free speech being absolutely hammered at the moment. The Kash, they thought they'd get away with it. The Kash Foundation is making sure they don't. We are exposing and holding these corrupt bureaucrats, radical activists, and deep state operatives accountable, from targeting pro-life activists to abuse of January the 6ers, J6ers. We're shining a light on the corruption they hoped would stay hidden. It's just absolutely despicable, that. But really what's going on is Project 2025 is being laid out, this 900-page document. I should go through that. I should do a video on that for sure. But it's interesting that, according to Politico, the architect of Project 2025 says the plan is working perfectly. Quote, "It's actually way beyond my wildest dreams." That's Paul Dans, the project's ousted former director, on how Trump is implementing his agenda after all. Beyond my wildest dreams. And Mehdi Hassan says, congrats to all the mainstream media folk who bought the Trump spin about not being associated with Project 2025, which is what Trump said. And of course, it is just entirely Project 2025 being laid out. And talking of which, we have Steve Bannon here speaking to Chris Cuomo, who says, I'm a firm believer that Trump will run again in 2028. I've already endorsed Trump. I want to see him again in 2028. You know he's term limited. How do you think he gets another term? Bannon says, we're working on it. And there you go. How important is the Constitution? Not particularly. They're going to find ways around it to get Trump ruling, I don't know, like a dictator forever. And we see that Trump is going after the January the 6th panel, the bipartisan group of people who investigated the January the 6th fracas. That's an understatement, insurrection. And he's pardoned, of course, all of the people involved in that. The January the 6thers, allowed them out of prison. A bunch of them have gone back into prison because they are ne'er-do-wells committing other crimes. Trump said the pardons that Sleepy Joe Biden gave to the unselect committee of political thugs, as he calls them, and many others are hereby declared void, vacant, and of no further force or effect. So unilaterally declaring that the pardons that Biden gave in advance to the January the 6th committee have now been just wiped out because of the fact that they were done by auto pen. In other words, Joe Biden did not sign them, but more importantly, he did not know anything about them. It's just found out that Trump himself didn't sign. Was it the enemy's thingy act, this whole controversial thing to do with the Venezuelan prisoners that we're going to talk about in a second. So, Trump does this himself, just complete hypocrisy. Anyway, yada, 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 yada. He's going to, overrule those pardons, as I say, unilaterally. Donald Trump declared President Biden's pardons of the January 6th committee members void and vacant, despite having no power to do so. Will any Republican in Congress finally speak up against the corrupt president as he continues his assault on the Constitution and the rule of law, says Republicans against Trump and Pekka Kallianiemi. Democracy in the US is eroding fast. And that's kind of where we're at. David Frum, former speechwriter, I think, for one of the Bushes, says Trump claims power to overturn Article 1 of the Constitution, that's Congress's authority over spending, Article 2, predecessor's pardon power, and Article 3 by defying a federal court order. So he is literally being unconstitutional all the time at the moment, Trump. He has ignored judges' claims or asked that a judge is impeached. In fact, let's go to that next. So what's happened? Trump has called on a judge to be impeached. The context, he's done nothing wrong. If anyone, it's the executive branch, i.e. the president, for likely ignoring the judge's orders, says Lewis Goodall. No, only 15 federal judges have been impeached in the history of the US, largely for corruption. So this is a judge who Trump accuses of being a radical left lunatic. The judge that asked for a pause on these flights of supposedly Venezuelan gang members, or there's the due process hasn't been carried out in order to show that they are gang members, and there are arguments that actually some of them haven't been. They've been shipped off, hundreds of them, in these planes, had their heads shaved, marched off, and then sent to El Salvador, where they're going to this pretty horrific prison. And a judge said, actually, that needs to be stopped. And then Trump said, this radical left lunatic of a judge, a troublemaker and agitator who is sadly appointed by Barack Hussein Obama. Actually, I think appointed by Bush and then promoted by Obama. So anyway, just to fact check there, I think. He didn't win the popular vote by a lot. He didn't win all 7 swing states. He didn't win 2,750 of 520 to 525 counties. He didn't win anything. I won for many reasons, an overwhelming mandate, but fighting illegal immigration may have been the number one reason for this historic victory, he says in all caps. I'm just doing what the voters wanted me to. This judge, like many of the crooked judges I'm forced to appear before, should be impeached. We don't want vicious, violent and demented criminals, many of them deranged murderers, in our country. Make America great again. By the way, after willfully taking in Andrew Tate and his brother, who have now actually gone back to Romania, I think, because they were being taken to court in the US on rape charges. So he said, we don't want these people in our country, meanwhile bringing those people in. Lewis Goodall says this is a highly unusual public rebuke of the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, clearly aimed at Trump's call to impeach the judge. So what's happened is Justice Roberts has then come out and rebuked Donald Trump for this. So Chief Justice Roberts of the Supreme Court has come out and said, although he didn't use Trump's name, he said for more than 2 centuries it has been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. The normal appellate review process exists for that purpose. So that was seen as a direct rebuke of Trump. But anyway, just finishing Lewis Goodall's statement here. Highly unusual public rebuke from the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, clearly aimed at Trump's call to impeach the judge, is what we've just read. And Lewis Goodall continues, the backsliding is happening very, very quickly now, as Trump declares that it constitutes a high crime and misdemeanor worthy of impeachment for a federal judge to rule against him. Now, Trump's then gone and said, such a conflict of interest, looking at this judge, who is Boasberg, standing next to Doug Emhoff here, and then saying, therefore it's a conflict of interest because he's married to Kamala Harris, and therefore this guy is a liberal judge, to which many people have pointed out, so according to Trump, taking a photo with someone is proof that they were closely attached. May I refer you to countless photos of Trump hanging around with Jeffrey Epstein, the now dead and very much disgraced sex trafficker. And yes, just, of course, Trump's logic doesn't hold here. Very well pointed out by many people. Now, Trump then answered that, hey, well, Chief Justice Roberts didn't use my name, so I'm all right, thanks.
Because we're gonna first hit the other big news of the day, which was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court issued what a rare statement about your suggestion on Truth that you posted earlier today that Judge James Boasberg should be impeached after he ordered those deportation flights to El Salvador halted, essentially turned around. The Chief Justice said it was more than two centuries. We understood that essentially impeachment was for very rare circumstances and not an appropriate response to rulings you disagree with. What's your reaction to the courts stepping in to make a statement here? They didn't make a statement when Joe Biden decided to forgive all those student loans.
Well, he didn't mention my name in the statement. I just saw it quickly. He didn't mention my name,
Yeah.
but many people have called for his impeachment, the impeachment of this judge. I don't know who the judge is, but he's radical.
I don't know who he is, but I know he's radical and needs to be impeached. What? What are you talking about? You don't know what you're talking about. And of course, he really doesn't answer the question. He just says, well, I didn't mention my name, so I'm all right. Ron Filikowski says, this is the game that every Republican has figured out. You can criticize something Trump has done on virtually anything as long as you don't mention his name. I've documented hundreds of examples of this. So actually, when people do criticize Trump from a Republican position, they often just don't use his name. Then they can get away with that kind of criticism. Just give a kind of almost an abstract criticism of that idea, the thing that Trump has done. Just criticize the thing, but not the person, and then you can get away with it. New Republic reports that the government will no longer require shell companies to disclose their owners and beneficiaries. I've reported this previously, allowing wealthy corporations and individuals to hide their profits from the public. And foreign influence inside corporations and these exchanges and whatever, just everything that the Trump administration is doing at the moment is to the favor of Russia and China, to the favor of those seeking corruption, those seeking to obscure anything. I think there's a real move towards removing transparency from the American political landscape, but also the economic, commercial, financial landscape. And that is deeply, deeply worrying. I always talk about putting these events, executive orders, policies, put them in one pot or another. Is it the one that is the pot of rules and laws and norms and transparency and attacking corruption and pro-democracy, pro-freedom, etc., or is it the antithesis of that? And so many of these are in the antithesis of that. Why would you not require companies to disclose their owners and beneficiaries? Like, what is that going to enable? That is going to enable corruption. And when you have the FTC fighting against corruption, I mean, goodness me, you should watch this whole interview. But when you have the FTC fighting against corruption and then firing the commissioner, then you know that they are just looking to grift and to enable corruption. Let's listen to Rebecca Slaughter here at the beginning, because there's one point of this that is pretty staggering, and it just gives you a real reflection of what is going on. This is the grounding reason for pretty much everything that's taking place in the American government at the moment, which is follow the money. It's all about grift.
The FTC minority commissioners can do, and what commissioners at other independent agencies can do, is bring transparency and accountability to the work of the agency.
There you go.
So without the voice of the minority commissioners, if you see, for example, the FTC dismiss one of our many litigations against some of the big tech CEOs who flanked the president at his inauguration, you may not have any reason to know what was going on behind the scenes or what some other explanations or counter arguments will be. And that transparency and accountability has served the FTC really well for over 100 years.
And that's a very real thing. I mean, we have that picture of all of the CEOs who were flanking Trump at his inauguration, but the FTC is in active litigation with some of, maybe all of, a lot of these people.
So these are the people at Trump's inauguration. So you've got the CEO of Google, the CEO of Meta, the CEO of TikTok, the founder of Amazon, CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, the CEO of Apple, and the co-founder of Google. So the question is, were the FTC investigating any of these people? You know, because they paid a bunch of money to Trump for the inauguration and in other ways, such as Elon Musk 270 million, is it? Jeff Bezos just paid Trump 40 million for the rights to Melania Trump's documentary that she's going to make. Okay, that's a backdoor way of paying money directly to Trump. And then you've got, yeah, as I said, the money for the inauguration. I think all of those people paid at least $1 million to for the inauguration, which ended up not really happening because it ended up being too cold and going indoors. But all of these people sitting in prime positions, okay, I'm just wondering, because my cynical brain is thinking, maybe some of these people are being investigated by the FTC, and that's why the FTC has been purged, and investigations being stopped. And I wonder if that's connected to these people paying Trump money.
Almost all of them. Almost.
You're
all.
looking at the names. And
I'm looking at the names right now. Almost all of them.
And so you're saying that in your position, you'd be able to speak out and say, okay, hey, they just dismissed this case against this company. Here's why I think that's a problem, or I disagree.
Yeah, so for example, in 2019, when I was in minority commissioner at the FTC settled a big privacy case with the company that was then called Facebook for a $5 billion payment. The majority of the time touted it as the largest payment ever and a huge successful win for law enforcement. But I said I disagreed, that I thought it wasn't nearly what the violations merited, and people should understand it as a slap on the wrist for a company that had the kinds of profits and revenue that Facebook had at the time. And that kind of accountability is important. And for what?
So she said, yeah, virtually every single one of those people is being investigated by the FTC. All you need to do, this, to me, is everything that the Trump administration is about, which is money, which is corruption and grifting. Corruption and grifting. Any deregulation is deregulation to allow corruption and grifting. And I think that pretty much sums it up. Go and watch the rest of that interview to get a real sense there. But it's absolutely shocking. And then you have the gutting of the Internal Revenue Service. So the IRS are responsible for getting tax revenue, right? But people kind of hate the tax man. So they're always a bit of a political football where particularly the right, because they see tax as regulation, they want to get rid of the IRS. The thing is, the IRS is how you pay, literally how you pay for all government services. So if you are DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, what you'd want to do is make sure the government is as efficient as possible at, one, not spending money, and two, at getting money in. So why would you, at the same time as just slash all these services, also slash the IRS, where the IRS gets in somewhere between, some people say like $6 or $7 for every dollar spent on the IRS they bring in. And actually, when you look at the people who were sacked, and the 7,000 who were sacked, they were the ones that were looking at entities of over $10 million and above, they would be taking, if you're spending $1, for every $1 spent on those IRS people, you're getting like $20 back maybe. So the point being that, like, this is not government efficiency. This is ideology, because you are just not allowing the government to be able to effectively look at entities over $10 million and get the requisite tax back from them. Who does that benefit? All the people you just see, of course. US tax revenue could drop, says Newswire, by 10% because of this. Or $500 billion. So there's Doge going and say, oh, we saved a couple of billion here. Yeah, woo, well done us. But we've also cost $500 billion in lost revenue because of the Doge turmoil at the IRS, adding to the deficit. And that's a Washington Post actually reporting that. We did it. We made government more efficient at not collecting revenue. Well done. Again, what pot does that go into? And then, you know, when you've got people like these billionaires and millionaires in government, this Trump government has the most billionaires in it of any American government. In a shocking moment, Trump Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, says his 94-year-old mother-in-law, she wouldn't complain if her Social Security check didn't arrive, and only loud fraudsters would complain about it.
Let's say Social Security didn't send out their checks this month. My mother-in-law, who's 94, she wouldn't call and complain. She just wouldn't. She'd think.
I wonder why. Oh, that's it. Because your son-in-law has more money than you can poke a hairy stick at. Right, that's why. Because she doesn't need that check because you are her relative. But you know what? That is a very small sample size to extrapolate across the entire American public. You absolute idiot.
Thinks something got messed up, and she'll get it next month.
Yeah.
A fraudster always makes the loudest noise, screaming, yelling, and complaining. Let's say Social Security.
That's literally just the worst anecdote, story, bit of, I don't know, supposed to be, I guess, representation, analogy, whatever it is. Like, if those two people, I don't know what happens after this, but if I'd been interviewing him, oh, dude, we are going to town on what you've just said. Like, and so this then makes it incredibly, I think, irresponsible to interview in this kind of way. But they're probably like Federalist, blah blah blah, whatever. Just needs to be taken to town. That's an absolutely egregious bit of rationale. So what he's doing, of course, is he's laying the path he's laying the groundwork for the removal of Social Security check payments to people. That's what he's doing. Absolutely incredible. I was listening to an interview. It was someone actually on Fox News, a Democrat on Fox News, saying, hang on, no. You do realise what they're doing is they're closing down these offices for Social Security in these sort of rural areas. And then that means that people are unable to get to older people who don't use the internet and blah, 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 can't get to these places to get their Social Security checks. And then they say, oh, this is fraud because these people aren't actually receiving them, blah, blah, blah. And then it's this self-fulfilling prophecy. It's this, it's the way they're going about starting to shut down Social Security. Anyway, Doge, then, as well as all that kind of stuff, Doge broke into the building of USIP, US Institute of Peace. They literally broke in and pillaged it, says the CEO of the US Institute of Peace, which called DC Metro Police and reported the forcible break-in by Doge into USIP despite protests. That is not part of the executive branch. It is instead an independent non-profit. So Doge has absolutely no jurisdiction over USIP, and yet they broke in and did what they did. Plundering of its offices is what was reported. Well, warrantless search. The US Institute of Peace is suing the Trump administration after what it describes as a literal break-in by Doge, being reported variously. Now, the US Institute of Peace is an independent non-profit institution. It's not a government agency. This means Doge is expanding its attacks to the civil society sector. As we see in authoritarian states like China and Russia, our democracy is under siege, says Representative Jim McGovern. And then we go back to every record has been destroyed or falsified, every book rewritten. So this is not even a government agency, and they have been attacked by Doge and had their records taken or pillaged or whatever. Every picture's been repainted, every statue, etc., etc., etc. 1984. It's happening before your very eyes. And I played you this before, but this is just worth remembering that so much of this is about corruption, but also like the idea that you've got this dear leader, dictator that needs to be appeased at all points. And by appeased, I mean just you need to just say how wonderful he is.
He could have fought for us.
This is JB Pritzker, who is, and I have played you this before, but he is the Illinois state governor, and he's just out of interest, he's a billionaire himself, and he is a Democrat, but during COVID, well, he's going to tell you himself.
He really could have. Instead, he made self-serving deals. He would send life-saving equipment if only we would agree to praise him on the Sunday talk shows. That is literally a deal that he put in front of me. I was desperate. My hospitals were filling up.
In other words, he would only give us help if we went out and praised him publicly on the TV shows. He just needs that adulation. But it's also something that keeps you in power. It gives your electorate, your people, a sense that you are this wonderful, great leader. Imagine you're a dictator, Maduro or someone else, and you're wheeling out people who are otherwise opposition members, like obsequiously giving you praise in public on television. You're like, okay, well, maybe Maduro is awesome. And that's what you're thinking of Trump, because he's being bolstered by these statements from people that is, they're being bribed essentially to say. So what's the pushback? Well, pushback is very limited. We're going to get onto this. Chuck Schumer didn't vote as the in charge of the Democratic senators. He didn't come out and vote against, and nor did actually 10 of them vote against the continuing resolution, because he didn't want the government shut down. Now, I do understand some of the rationale for why he did do this. They did not vote against the Republicans, but the Democrats have to play really hard at the moment, and I think they've got to stick together, and this didn't show sort of unity. But it is difficult, because if you're voting to shut down the government, then it allows the Trump administration to do even more despicable things unilaterally, and that's what Chuck Schumer says here.
Government shutdown that will force President Trump and Republicans to the negotiating table. Why not use your vote to push back and fight?
Because the idea that they would go to the negotiating table is they don't do it. This is a new group. This is not the old group. Let me explain. I knew when I took this vote there'd be a lot of protests, but I felt I had to do it for the future, not only of the Democratic Party, but the country. Because as bad as that CR bill was, and it was bad, a shutdown is 10 times worse. Let me give you what happens.
Been blamed on the Democrats.
And you're right, Gail. But can I just explain
what? But you had been saying you were not going to vote. I think people were upset with you, and people are very upset with you, because you had led people to believe that, no, I'm going to vote against.
Okay, well, let me explain why first the shutdown is terrible. People ought to know that. The executive branch, in this case, Musk, Doge, and this horrible guy Vogt, who have no concern for working people, would have had sole power to determine what opens and what closes. They determine what is essential. You can't go to court. So on day 2, get rid of SNAP and food for hungry kids. It's not essential. Day 4, get rid of mass transit aid. Let New York City do it. Not essential. Cut back on Medicaid and health care. Within 2 weeks, everyone would have been howling. Furthermore, it's even worse. It has no off-ramp. Guess who determines when we leave the shutdown? The Republicans. And let's not forget how bad they are. This guy Vogt, probably the most evil man. He's the guy who came up with that Project 2025.
Yes.
Yeah, he has a whole playbook of what to shut down. So they had said, one of the Republican senators who knows said to us, you'll be in the shutdown for 6 to 9 months till we totally destroy the federal government. So the shutdown was a much worse alternative. I knew I'd get a lot of flack.
But Senator,
So that is an interesting kind of pushback to these criticisms of Schumer. And it's difficult. Who would want to be Chuck Schumer? But there are a lot of people coming out and saying that he was weak in not standing up to the Republicans and not allowing this CR bill to go through, and therefore, the money not to go through. Because what happened with the CR bill is kind of like a budget interim agreement, is that they didn't go to the Democrats at all to talk about it. They're just like, they said, normally you go and say, this is what we're planning on doing, and you come to some kind of bipartisan agreement. No. So they just said, this is what we're going to do, and it's obviously going to have all the things that the Democrats wouldn't want in. So the Democrats are like, well, we're not going to vote for that. But then it means that you don't get a budget through, and the government shuts down. And then, people are out of work, and it's all horrific. And then the Republicans can do even more terrible stuff because the courts close or whatever. So it was damned if you do, damned if you don't. But just to give you a sense of the problems with that. And, meanwhile, this kind of stuff is happening all the time at the moment. Breaking 26 Americans dead from yesterday's storm. So this is when those horrific storms were going on just recently around the US, and Trump says nothing. So remember all the criticisms of Biden for not going to the train site that had a crash where no one died. Trump's had like wildfires taking out places, hurricanes, just all sorts of horrific things. And is not just not been there, but he's actually not said things as well. And then he goes, instead of saying anything about these horrific events, he then brings out this as a true social. I just won the golf club championship, probably my last, at Trump International Golf Club, which of course they let him win, in Palm Beach County, Florida. Such a great honor. The awards dinner is tonight at the club. I want to thank the wonderful golf staff and all the many fantastic golfers that participated in the events. Such fun. So he found time to brag about that, but not to talk about, people who died in the storm. Priorities, says Chris Jackson there. So that's kind of where we're at. Okay, we're going to move on to talk specifically about this, the Venezuelan gangs situation, where they have been, hundreds of these Venezuelans being rounded up, supposedly kind of gang members, and then sent to this prison in El Salvador, which is a pretty horrendous prison called the CESO. I presume that's how you pronounce it. Controversial prison known for its harsh conditions, built by the dictator Bukele in El Salvador. So it has capacity for 40,000 inmates in the middle of a rural region. And he's completely hardline Bukele. He's then locked up loads. He said the whole murder rate's gone down in El Salvador, but basically he's locked everyone up and kind of thrown away the keys as well. So about this prison, he said in August, gang members will spend their entire lives in prison, and the Justice Minister vowed in 2023 that officials will make sure none of those who enter the CESO ever leave on foot. So this is a really horrific place where each person has about 0.6 square meters of room for themselves. I presume that's in the anyway, that's in study found that inmates had an average of 0.6 square meters of space below international standards. And anyway, that's where these Venezuelan supposed gang members are being sent. And what happened is there were, I think, 3 plane loads of them. And a judge then halted that, but the Trump administration said, "Oh, I'm sorry, the planes are in the sky already, so we can't turn them around. So since they're in international airspace, that judgment doesn't pertain to those planes." And that's how that's how the Trump administration got around it. But it's pretty terrible. So I'm going to play. There's several versions of this. One is slightly longer than this. I'm going to play you this in its whole because it's pretty horrific. So this is a US government video, and you tell me whether this looks like a dystopian movie that you would watch, where you have some authoritarian regime treating people despicably, etc., etc. This is the US produced video. This is a version without all the music. And actually, it's longer version has a bit more and etc. etc. But yeah, more than 200 Venezuelans have apparently been sent there now. That's the CESO place, and as mentioned, it was overruled by a judge or put on pause. But this is because the US president he announced on Saturday he had signed a proclamation invoking, and arguably he did this by auto pen, so that was, I think that was a claim for this, invoking the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. So what this meant is he can accuse these gang members of perpetrating, attempting and threatening an invasion or predatory incursion against the territory of the United States. So this has only been invoked in times of war. The Japanese in the Second World War then got rounded up and put into camps because of this, and then previously. Now, this, you can argue, is not a war. Like, the Venezuelan gang members are not at war in a way that you would understand from that kind of phraseology. but it's just an excuse to be able to do this, and it's an excuse to be able to have kind of authoritarian agency in the United States. It's crazy. So Dr. Ian Garner says of this video, authoritarianism in the internet age feeds on this sort of spectacle, part film, part advert, all produced for the baying mob to consume and discuss, divides between reality TV, social media, and the state violence, and state violence completely collapse. So those divisions completely collapse. And this is where you have over this video, this is a 3-minute long one, Donald Trump's, these are the monsters sent into our country by crooked Joe Biden and the radical left Democrats. How dare they? Thank you to El Salvador and in particular President Bukele for your understanding of this horrible situation which was allowed to happen to the United States because of incompetent Democrat leadership. We will not forget. And of course, this is a video taking those people from the US to El Salvador to do this. So this is a propaganda video really on behalf of both the US government and this prison in El Salvador and what Bukele is doing. And there have been these claims that some of the people that have been taken in this way, had their heads shaved, put in those clothes, taken to those facilities have not indeed been Venezuelan gang members, but because there's been no due process, and that is why the judge has halted it, because there's been no due process to prove that these guys are the people that ICE is claiming that they are, and that's what's causing all this controversy. But yeah, so on and so forth. That is causing an awful lot of ruckus, and it does just make the US look more and more like it is going down this authoritarian route. The court order was defied, first of many, as I've been warning, and it's the start of a true constitutional crisis, says Mark Zaid. Ultimately, it will lead to Trump impeachment proceedings, is the prediction there. But you know, you can tell Stephen Miller's going to be behind this. He is the one who is is a fascist essentially, and complete xenophobe. But you're starting to get stuff like this. It's Valentina Gomez, who is she elected? Yeah, she's a MAGA activist, political activist, financier, real estate investor. She and her family immigrated to the US in 2009. Wow. Her political campaign she launched a Missouri Secretary of State run in 2024. Just anti all the woke stuff and just being massively anti-immigration to the point where, you know, this is cheaper than deportation. She has a mock up of someone being shot in the head, so an execution. She's advocating execution. Same treatment should go for all pedophiles. Congress is the only good at having useless hearings, blah blah blah. But yeah, she had a video that was restricted about, it's that simple, public executions for any illegal that rapes or kills an American. They don't deserve deportation. They deserve to be ended. And yeah, stuff like this. So, you know, you may agree with capital punishment, etc., etc. But what this is doing is just whipping up a really, I think, authoritarian sentiment in the public. And then you've got Trump's former National Security Advisor, Mike Flynn, who continues to host events at Mar-a-Lago, says it's time for Trump to declare martial law. And this is in response, I think, to the kind of Tesla situation, quite possibly. But yeah, real Donald Trump. So Donald Trump and his team must move rapidly to course correct America's direction, given the extreme danger the Joe Biden administration left the nation in. They are moving as fast as humanly possible. No, they're not. But everyone who is awake can see how many obstacles are being thrown in front of Trump's agenda to take care of America first in order to MAGA. Enough is enough. President Trump may eventually have to declare a national emergency. He has full authority to do so. Don't be surprised if the nation gets to that point. Many elites on both sides in the United States still believe that what is happening in America is old school, hardball politics, you know, Democrats versus Republicans. It is not. So it's all incredible. But when you put that together with this kind of rhetoric and then this kind of activity, deportation of the Venezuelans in that way, I'm not saying, you know, deport illegal gang members, what I am saying is follow due process and the letter of the law to make sure that you're doing things correctly. That's what I'm saying. It's all starting to look like almost martial law. And, the Illegal Enemies Act, I keep forgetting the name of it, but that is on the way to getting to this point where it's looking like almost like some kind of quasi martial law to some extent. Alien Enemies Act of 1798, that was it. But yeah, incredible stuff. Okay, so moving on from there, here we are. This is okay. So this is Bill Madden saying, "This is chilling. This is the behavior of dictators in fascist authoritarian regimes. Trump is giving zero credence to US laws, the Constitution, and federal judges. Like Hitler, Trump believes he is untouchable and has ultimate power over everyone and everything." This is talking about being able to kind of ignore the judges, etc.
The hearing just ended on whether the Trump administration violated a court order when it deported Venezuelan migrants to El Salvador. Andrew Weissman's been monitoring that hearing for us.
So this is a doozy. So the judge wanted to have a factual hearing. He said, "I'm not going to make a ruling today on whether you're in contempt. I want to understand the facts better." That usually means that the government, knowing that they're there, has to answer. This was their answer. "We are not telling you the facts." The judge had a whole series of questions about what happened. When did the planes take off? When did they land? Who was on the planes? How many people? All the normal things you'd want to know. When did the declaration, the proclamation by the president, when was it signed? When did it go into effect? No answer. "We are not telling you, Judge." The judge said, "Well, can't you tell me if you're saying it's classified? I get classified information all the time." He's the chief judge in the district court. He said, "Why can't you tell me at least privately?" "We're not telling you that. We're not giving you the law as to why we can tell you." And the judge pointed out, he said, "You have the burden on that. You have to do that." And so he then said, "Why did you ignore my order yesterday? What's your answer?" And they said, "We're not required to comply with an oral order from the bench. You had been talking to me about all the things about bring the planes back. I'm ordering you to do that." They said that was an oral order, and we viewed that as superseded by the written order, so we didn't have to comply with it. The judge seemed incredulous at that.
So they are just coming up with excuses not to fulfill the judge's demands. And they're saying, "We don't have to give you facts. You're asking for information from us. We're not going to give it to you," which is defying the courts, like very, very directly. And that's why Bill Madden said this is chilling. This is like, the judiciary is now functionally impotent. And when you start moving towards this unified executive theory where you're kind of unifying the three branches of government in the US, Congress, judiciary, and executive, which is kind of the president, then, you have power in his people are in position in all, only really his people, not just like these are Democratic nominations. These are Trump's loyalists in charge of the FBI, the CIA, as the DNI, so on and so forth. Really, really chilling stuff. And to use that word again, Julia Davis says, "Chilling effect on free speech. Trump wants all green card applicants already legally in the US to hand over their social media profiles." And this is as we hear that a French person, in fact, I think I have that next, yes, a French researcher going to a conference in Houston was forbidden entry to the US. His work and personal electronics were both confiscated. Why? Because of a random search of his cell phone revealed a negative personal opinion of Trump and the Trump administration. So freedom of speech is not a thing anymore. If you have criticized Trump, you do not get allowed into the country. That is incredible. And what else do we have? Trump's ICE goons detained a Canadian actress because of confusion over over a work visa for 2 weeks, shackled, thrown into a van, sent to Arizona, kept awake, not allowed to contact a lawyer. And in fact, this has been fact-checked by Snopes. ICE detained Canadian-American Pie actress Jasmine Mooney for 12 days. And that is true. That did happen. National Post saying Canadian woman speaks out about her treatment in the US. We were bound in chains that wrapped tightly around our waist, with our cuffed hands secured to our bodies and shackles restraining our feet. Canadian woman who was detained for nearly 2 weeks by immigration officials in the US for speaking out about her experience in an extensive account in The Guardian titled "It Felt Like I Had Been Kidnapped." So that's Jasmine Mooney's account there. So absolutely incredible. But then not just that, UK tourist returns home in chains like Hannibal Lecter. Becky Burke was released in chains and handcuffs after spending 19 days in an ICE detention facility. Just wow. So there you go. Just crazy times at the moment. This is Mark Elias, who is for the Democracy Docket, fights legally on behalf of democracy in the US.
Why is Speaker Johnson just not willing to assert House prerogatives?
Part of the answer to that is the ethical collapse of the Republican Party. We saw what happened to anyone who dissented or opposed Donald Trump's autocratic ambitions. We saw what happened to Liz Cheney. We saw what happened to Adam Kinzinger, Mitt Romney, you name it. I mean, there were 10 Republican House members who voted to impeach. There were 7 Republican senators who voted to convict, and the vast majority of them are gone. And that's almost Donald Trump's predominant motivation. And that's more important to him than even being in the majority. He wants to have absolute control over the party. So part of that, does demonstrate the complete deterioration of GOP ethics and support for Congress as a branch. What we have now is people who are loyal to the institution of the political party before the formal constitutional institutions.
Why is Speaker Johnson just...
There you go. The ethical collapse of the Republican Party and the desire to see Trump have full control and power. And it's so bizarre that we've got to the new normal where the UK has issued a travel warning for citizens to go to the US. Germany's issued a travel warning. Finland and Denmark have issued travel warnings. I think Australia has now. A whole bunch of countries have issued travel warnings for people going to the United States. That's the sort of thing you normally do for, like, if you're going to Sudan, here's a warning, don't do this, don't do that, or don't go there. Here, although it's advice saying, adhere to the rules, make sure you blah, 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 blah. It's not like the worst of warnings, but it shows you, I think, where the US is at the moment in terms of, certainly from perceptions abroad. Absolutely incredible. I'm actually not going to go on to the Canada stuff now. I'm going to leave that. We'll just do a little bit of very quick Musk and cuts and things, because it kind of fits into what we were talking about. So remember that lots of people have been protesting against oligarchs and Tesla. Lots of people coming out with AOC and Bernie Sanders and others on the road. There's been this huge this huge surge of people needing an outlet. And Doge has been doing their thing. Tesla and Musk has been doing his thing, and Tesla has been seen as this representation of Musk. And so there have been these protests at Tesla, garages, sales places. My MS is getting the most of me there, and that has also spilled over into people burning Teslas and whatnot. Now, the US and Trump has declared these people terrorists, right? Which is basically a shortcut to being able to arrest these people and do kind of much more horrific things to them. Reporter, what do you say to military families who are seeing Musk at the Pentagon, hearing about DoD cuts, and their thoughts are immediately going to the safety of their loved ones? We're making our country strong, and they should do is realize the New York Times is a corrupt institution. So his answer to questions about Doge, about cuts to the DoD, questions about Musk, is to just say, is not answer the question and just say the New York Times is corrupt. And he said that every time he gets asked by anyone, like it can be ABC, Associated Press. If it's a difficult question, he says, who asked it? And they go, Associated Press. He says, I'm not answering that. Not answering it because it's a difficult question. You aren't strong enough to answer difficult questions. He is weak, and he's not strong in that sense that he has the ability to answer critical questions. Musk has offered, or a super PAC group of his, the America Super PAC, I think again, he did this before the election, is now offering $100 to Wisconsin voters ahead of a pivotal state Supreme Court election. He's piling in loads of money into this chap Schimmel, who is going to run really controversially in the Supreme Court in Wisconsin. This is really important election, and other people are funding the person running against Schimmel, and this is becoming super, super important. Watch out for this one, but certainly Musk has backed this person to the hilt with an awful lot of money and is now bribing people to exactly the same as he did before the election. Sign this petition, we'll give you $100, but that signing the petition gets you into the ecosystem of, you know, voting for the person I want you to vote for. So there is lots of pushback against Musk at the moment. In the UK, there have been an awful lot of posters going up around. I think this is great. A Tesla dragging a rake around a beach doing this. I mean, absolutely quite incredible, making this sign on a beach, and this is what they spell out in the end. Absolutely incredible, with Musk doing his Roman salute, if you like. Don't buy a Tesla. Just huge. So there's loads of protest happening in many different ways. The electric car guys are one making this happen. What? Well, the NOAA Global Monitoring Laboratory, so this is the Atmospheric Association, the people who do the weather, but they're a government agency in the US. They've been defunded largely. The NOAA Monitoring Laboratory, global one in Mauna Loa near Hilo in Hawaii, has been monitoring CO2 levels for the past 65 years, is set to shut down. Trump, in reality, if we can't see CO2 levels rising, then it must not be happening. Again, climate science appears to be too woke for the, you know, science is woke. US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick tells Fox viewers to buy Tesla vehicles, right? So he's doing this on Fox News. We had that sales pitch on the White House lawn with Trump, right? I'm not going to play you this. You can imagine it. He's telling people to go out and buy Teslas. Just listen to this, because this shows you how wrong all of that kind of activity is.
Listen to me when I tell you that I worked as a government employee, a federal government employee, for the past 3 years at national park sites, and I could not, as a government employee, I could not recommend a restaurant to visitors because.
So, sorry, browser issues there. So let her continue.
To visitors because, as a government employee, I could not show preference for specific businesses. As a government employee, I could not endorse businesses. I could not show preference for even a restaurant when people asked me what was good to eat in town after their day in the park. And now he is standing in front of the White House with Teslas.
So on and so forth. Howard Lutnick on Fox, go and buy a Tesla. Donald Trump and the White House, buy a Tesla. I bought a Tesla. These are great. It's all computers. Wonderful, wonderful. And then someone working for the Forestry Commission is not allowed to endorse any restaurant. You asked me where you can eat around here. I cannot say. I can just say there are restaurants around here, but I can't tell you should go and eat in any one. And that's kind of right. That's right. So what Howard Lutnick and what Trump are doing is wrong. Talking about wrongness, Rick Wilson of the Lincoln Project, a former Republican, has just been kicked off Twitter for 30 days because he talked about how to make Elon personally feel the same economic pain he's whacking the country with, and Elon didn't like that. Elon and his VP Trump spent the last week trying to silence dissenters because, of course, free speech absolutism, right? Free speech absolutism, including the press and judges, all while pretending to be victimized. They will wreck the First Amendment if we don't continue to stand up. Yeah, there you go. And the Attorney General, so Pam Bondi, said to Jasmine Crockett, a representative from Texas, or representing Texas, said, tread very carefully with your Musk critique. So the Attorney General has threatened the free speech of an American politician. Tread carefully. when you are critiquing Elon Musk. Wow. Respectfully, Pam Bondi, says Joe Walsh, F off. This is America. We have free speech here. We are free to criticize Elon Musk. This is an utterly un-American thing for you to say. Just do your damn job and reread the First Amendment. Now, there are some good ones. Republican Representative Celeste Malloy has received applause in a Thursday town hall in Salt Lake City. Interesting, though, this is, I don't know, Mormon. Utah's a little bit different, a bit funky, where actually they prefer libertarians. They're not so drinking the Kool-Aid for the Republicans there, or for Trump there. When she told the crowd she's concerned about the country drifting towards authoritarianism if we don't get the executive branch under control. So there are a rare few, but what you're really seeing is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders trying to get this narrative going about billionaires and oligarchs running the government. And there were over 30,000 people in a Denver rally, which would be a record crowd for any Sanders event, even when he was running for president, including both his presidential campaigns. This was an overflow crowd in Greeley in Colorado, real rural place that. So it's, place you would expect a lot of Republican support. Well, actually huge. That's the overflow crowd going on, back there and whatnot. The American people are saying no to authoritarianism and oligarchy. And then this is AOC coming out in Arizona, where they had a really big event there. So you can see that is obviously one way of being able to deal with the growing, not sense of authoritarianism, the growing reality of authoritarianism, I think, in the US. There are so many double standards, people. The last thing I'm going to leave you with is just this. I mean, I see this all the time, where you get real MAGA people saying, America's finally being defended again at home and abroad. I voted for this. So this is Paul Shibula saying, yeah, we're bombing the Houthis in Yemen. This is bombing the Houthis in Yemen the other day, where the Americans did that again. And this person saying, America's finally being defended again. And this is the same person who said, why is Biden, this is going back now to December 2024, why is Biden bombing Yemen instead of defending the US border? Okay, interesting. So bombing bad then, bombing good now. Right, okay, fair enough. So you see that an awful lot, a lot of double standards. Anyway, that's enough from me. You get, I'm painting this picture. Well, no, this picture is painting itself of America going through a real political turmoil at the moment, whereby they're having to contend domestically with this growing authoritarianism, where the judiciary is being sidelined, where all sorts of executive orders are being passed, where you've got, or thrown down, where you've got Project 2025 by people like Vaught and Dans being used as the blueprint, which is what I certainly warned of, and many others did, being used as a blueprint for Trump's presidency. And it is taking the US seriously backwards, I would argue, in terms of democracy. All the while, we have everything that's going on around the world, and Ukraine, and you got China, you got Russia, and I think the US are taking their eyes off the ball because they are just doing everything all at once. And even when it does come to Ukraine and Russia in particular, all of those things align fully, I think, with what Russia would want, and it falls into the category, I think, broadly of the ideology of Project 2025 and Trump and his team around him. So yeah, it's all very, very worrying for both the US and for the wider world, I would argue. Let me know what you think. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.